I stood across the street from the church, watching guests arrive for my only daughter's wedding. My invitation? Rescinded. The words Megan had screamed still burned in my ears. "You're banned from my wedding, old lady, until you apologize." For what? Being insufficiently impressed by her $8,000 dress? While they celebrated inside, I signed the final papers selling our family home. The money was already safely transferred. Tomorrow, her perfect wedding bubble would burst spectacularly. Sometimes the deepest love means allowing someone to face the consequences of their actions. People always told me that raising a child alone would be the hardest thing I'd ever do. They weren't entirely wrong, but they missed something crucial. Watching that child transform into someone you barely recognize is far more painful. I raised Megan by myself after my husband David died in a construction accident when she was only 8 years old. The morning it happened remains crystal clear in my memory. I was working my shift at Memorial Hospital when my supervisor pulled me aside with that look nurses know all too well. The one that says bad news is coming. 3 hours later, I was sitting with our daughter on our worn living room couch, trying to explain why Daddy wouldn't be coming home again. We had been a team after that, Megan and I. For years, it was just the two of us against the world. I worked 2 jobs, full-time as a nurse and weekends doing bookkeeping for a local plumbing company. Every spare dollar went toward giving Megan opportunities. Dance lessons when she showed interest. The private school across town when the public one had that trouble with gangs. College savings that slowly grew despite countless times I was tempted to dip into it for emergencies. My own dreams took a permanent back seat. The little beach cottage I'd always wanted to buy someday remained just that, a someday dream. My retirement fund was modest at best, but watching Megan graduate high school as valedictorian made every sacrifice worthwhile. "I'm going to make you so proud, Mom," she'd said that day, hugging me tight in her cap and gown. "Everything you've done for me, I'm going to pay it all back someday." The first 2 years of college, she came home often, still my sweet girl, but junior year, something shifted. She joined a sorority, started dating boys from wealthy families, and her visits became less frequent. When she did come home, she'd make little comments about our house being cozy in that tone that actually meant small and outdated. She'd examine the furniture with a slight wrinkle in her nose. I told myself it was just a phase. Then Megan met Jackson Palmer during her senior year internship at his father's investment firm. The Palmers were old money, the kind of family with a summer home in the Hamptons and whose names appeared in charity gala photos. Jackson was handsome in that polished way that screamed private schools and sailing lessons. When Megan brought him home the first time, I watched him subtly check his watch during dinner, as if counting the minutes until he could leave. "Jackson thinks I should apply to grad school in New York," Megan announced that evening. "His father knows someone on the admissions board at Columbia." That was the beginning. Each time I saw them together, Megan seemed to slip further away, adopting Jackson's mannerisms, his dismissive tone when speaking about ordinary people, his expectation that doors would always open for him. When Megan called to announce their engagement 2 years later, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. She sounded happier than I'd heard her in ages, but there was something performative in her excitement, as if she was auditioning for a role she wasn't quite sure she could play. "Jackson's parents are throwing us a proper engagement party," she'd said. "You'll need to get something appropriate to wear, Mom. Something elegant." The emphasis on that last word stung, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was my daughter's special time. I told her I'd saved $75,000 over the years, my life savings, including what would have been my beach cottage fund. I wanted her to have the wedding of her dreams. "Oh, Mom, that's so sweet," she'd exclaimed, sounding momentarily like my old Megan again. "This wedding is going to be perfect." The first few weeks of wedding planning were almost like having my daughter back. We looked at venues together. She asked my opinion on flowers. We laughed over ridiculous wedding traditions. Then came the day that opened my eyes to how much things had really changed. We were at Elegance Bridal, the most expensive boutique in the city, with Jackson's mother Diane and Megan's 4 bridesmaids, all sorority sisters with highlighted hair and diamond tennis bracelets. Megan emerged from the dressing room in a gown that cost more than my car. "It's $12,000, the consultant whispered to me with a conspiratorial smile, as if we were sharing good news. "That seems excessive," I said quietly. "There's a lovely boutique across town that has beautiful dresses for a third of that price." The room went silent. Megan's face transformed, her smile hardening into something ugly and unfamiliar. "Typical," she said with a dismissive laugh, turning to her future mother-in-law. "Mom still has her bargain hunting mentality. She doesn't understand that some things are worth investing in." The bridesmaids tittered. Diane Palmer gave me a tight smile and patted my arm. "We all come from different backgrounds," she said in a tone dripping with condescension. "The Palmers have always believed in quality." "I think you look absolutely stunning, darling," she continued, turning to Megan. "This is definitely the one. Don't worry about the price. It's just money, after all." I sat there, face burning, as they all gushed over the dress. Megan didn't even look at me again during the appointment. When they all decided to go for champagne afterward, I wasn't explicitly invited. I made an excuse about an early shift the next day and drove home alone. That night, I cried for the first time in years. Not just from the humiliation, but because I finally saw clearly what my daughter had become. And worse, I realized my own role in it. I had spent 20 years never saying no, making her the center of my universe, teaching her that my purpose was to fulfill her needs. Now I was facing the consequences of those well-intentioned mistakes. A week after the dress shopping disaster, I invited Megan and Jackson to dinner at my house. I told myself it was an olive branch, a chance to reconnect. Deep down, I knew it was also a desperate attempt to see if any trace of my real daughter remained. I spent the entire day cooking David's family lasagna recipe, setting the table with the good dishes we'd received as wedding gifts, and putting fresh flowers from my garden in the center. I even dug out photo albums of Megan growing up, hoping they might remind her of our bond. They arrived 45 minutes late. No apology. Megan immediately wrinkled her nose at the house. "Mom, when are you going to update this place?" "Those curtains were old when I was in high school," she said, dropping her designer purse on the couch. Jackson barely made eye contact as he scrolled through his phone. "Something smells homey," he said, making it sound like an insult. During dinner, Megan picked at her food while telling me about all the wedding details I hadn't been consulted on. The venue had been upgraded to the Grand Plaza Hotel downtown. The guest list had expanded to 200 people. The flowers were being imported from Holland. "The Palmers are contributing $100,000, Megan said, as if daring me to match it. "But we're still running a bit over budget with all the extras." "I've already offered my entire savings," I reminded her gently. $75,000 is everything I've put aside for retirement and my beach cottage dream." "We know, Mom, and it's appreciated," Megan said quickly. "But there are just so many unexpected expenses. The photographer we want is $18,000 alone." $18,000 for photographs? I couldn't hide my shock. "Megan, that's almost half a year's salary for me." Jackson looked up from his phone for the first time. "If you can't contribute more, we understand. My parents can cover the difference." The way he said it made it clear that my financial inadequacy was expected. "No," I said, feeling something twist inside me. "I can help. I can take out a home equity line. This house is paid off, so there's considerable value there." Megan's face brightened instantly. "That would be amazing, Mom. We could upgrade the band we wanted and get the premium open bar package." As they left that night, Megan gave me a quick hug, the first physical contact we'd had in months. I clung to that hug, telling myself that helping with the wedding would bring us closer again. Over the next few months, the pattern became clear. Megan only called when she needed something. Another $5,000 for upgraded flowers, $3,000 more for the premium bar package, $8,000 for a videographer team. Each time, I transferred the money without question, dipping deeper into my home equity. "You're the best, Mom," she'd say each time, before quickly ending the call to handle some other urgent wedding matter. I was excluded from most planning meetings. When I asked about attending the menu tasting, Megan told me it had already happened. When I offered to help with addressing invitations, she said her bridesmaids had handled it. The final blow came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was at work when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hello? Is this Annabelle Williams? This is Carolyn from Exotic Escapes Travel. I'm just confirming the final payment for Megan and Jackson's honeymoon package to Bali. The remaining $30,000 is due this week. I nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, did you say $30,000? For a honeymoon? There was an awkward pause. Yes, for the 2-week luxury package with private villa and excursions. Megan said you'd be handling the payment as part of the wedding expenses. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I looked through Megan's financial information. As her mother, I was still listed on some of her accounts from college. What I found made me physically ill. Megan had opened 3 new credit cards with me as an authorized user without my knowledge. Together, they carried a balance of $22,000, all wedding expenses. When I confronted her by phone, her response left me speechless. Mom, why are you being so controlling? This is my special day. The honeymoon is part of the wedding expense. You promised to help with the wedding. And those cards are just temporary until we get wedding gifts and can pay them off. Megan, you committed me to $52,000 without even discussing it. That's not right. Oh my God, you're trying to ruin everything, she snapped. Jackson's family is watching every detail of this wedding. I can't have them thinking we can't afford a proper honeymoon or that we're cutting corners. We are cutting corners, Megan, I said firmly. We're spending money we don't have. No, you don't have it. But this house has plenty of equity, like you said. You're just being selfish. This is the most important day of my life. She hung up on me, then texted an hour later as if nothing had happened. By the way, the rehearsal dinner is at the Capitol Grill next Thursday at 7. Don't wear that navy suit you always wear. Something more modern, please. The night of the rehearsal dinner, I arrived wearing a new dress I couldn't afford, trying one last time to bridge the growing gap between us. I was seated at the back table with distant relatives and the college roommate of Jackson's mother. Throughout the evening, Megan made a show of publicly thanking Jackson's parents for their incredible generosity and support, while my financial contributions weren't mentioned once. During cocktail hour, I slipped away to use the restroom and overheard Megan talking to her bridesmaids in the hallway. God, it's exhausting having to manage Mom's expectations, Megan was saying. Did you see that discount store dress she's wearing? So embarrassing. At least you convinced her to pay for the honeymoon, one friend replied. That villa looks amazing in the photos. Yeah, but now she's getting all weird about money. Like, what did she expect? That I'd have a backyard wedding with drugstore flowers? They all laughed. Jackson's mom would have died. Are you still going to Photoshop her in the wedding photos? Another girl asked. To make her look less frumpy? Their laughter cut through me like glass. I waited until they left, then composed myself as best I could, and returned to the dinner. When it ended, I approached Megan privately, determined to have one honest conversation. Megan, we need to talk about what's happening, I said gently. I feel like I've become nothing more than a checkbook to you. Mom, not now, she hissed. This is my rehearsal dinner. Yes, now. I've spent over $130,000 on this wedding. I've taken equity out of my home. And tonight I heard you mocking me to your friends. Her face hardened. You were spying on me? That's just great. I wasn't spying. I overheard. There's a difference. Look, I'm sorry if your feelings are hurt, but this wedding isn't about you. It's about me and Jackson starting our life together. A life built on debt and lies? Megan, these credit cards you opened? Oh my God, she exploded, loud enough that people nearby turned to look. You're banned from my wedding, old lady, until you apologize for making this about you. I stood there, stunned into silence as she continued. I've already told people you probably won't attend because of health issues. No one will even miss you. Jackson appeared at her side, glaring at me. Is there a problem here? Megan, your friends are waiting. My mother is being toxic, Megan said tearfully. She's trying to ruin everything because she's jealous that I'm happy. I think you should leave, Jackson told me coldly. This is supposed to be a celebration, not a time for your drama. As I collected my purse, I could hear the wedding party in the private room, laughing about something. Through the partially open door, I caught a glimpse of Megan wiping away fake tears, while simultaneously winking at her bridesmaids. I walked to my car alone, a strange calm settling over me. 20 years of sacrifice had culminated in this moment. My daughter wasn't just spoiled or entitled, she actively despised me and everything I represented. The realization was both devastating and, strangely, liberating. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in our family living room, the room where I'd read Megan bedtime stories, nursed her through chickenpox, helped her with science fair projects. I pulled out old photo albums, tracing the journey from the sweet, grateful child to the contemptuous bride who had just banned me from her wedding. There was 8-year-old Megan on her first Christmas without her father, bravely smiling through her grief. 12-year-old Megan winning the regional spelling bee, running to hug me first thing after her victory. 16-year-old Megan learning to drive in our old Toyota, both of us laughing as she accidentally hit the curb. When had it changed? I could pinpoint moments now, opportunities when I should have set boundaries but hadn't. The time she demanded new clothes when we couldn't afford them, and I put them on a credit card rather than say no. The birthday when she threw a tantrum about not getting the right brand of phone, and I worked extra shifts to buy it. The college application process when I let her apply only to expensive private schools, taking out loans I'm still paying back. I'd treated her like the fragile, bereaved child long after she'd grown up. I'd tried to compensate for her missing father by never being the bad guy, and now we were both paying the price. As dawn broke, I made myself a cup of coffee and faced the truth. Megan didn't just expect my support, she felt entitled to it. She'd mentioned several times how she expected to inherit this house someday. Just last month, she'd casually talked about selling it after the wedding to finance their starter apartment in the city. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank accounts. The wedding had nearly wiped me out. Between the $75,000 in savings and the home equity line, I had contributed over $130,000. Now I discovered Megan had charged an additional $15,000 on the credit cards she'd opened with me as co-signer. She clearly expected me to pay those bills after the wedding. Searching through my email, I found something that crystallized everything. In an exchange with her maid of honor that Megan had accidentally copied me on, and clearly hadn't realized, she and Jackson discussed their post-wedding financial plan. Step 1. Convince Mom to sell the house. Step 2. Guilt her into giving us the money for a down payment on the downtown condo. Step 3. Take her furniture to fill it. She won't need much in a retirement apartment anyway. They had it all planned out. My future, my home, my life. In that moment, something shifted inside me. A lifetime of putting everyone else first, my patients, my daughter, my late husband's memory, suddenly gave way to a question I'd never seriously asked myself. What about me? That morning, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to Harriet, my financial advisor, who had been gently warning me for years about my excessive generosity. The second was to Franklin, a lawyer friend who had helped me with David's estate. The third was to my credit card companies. By noon, I had canceled all joint cards and removed myself as guarantor from the remaining vendor contracts for the wedding. Anything Megan had already signed for would be her sole responsibility now. The honeymoon package that hadn't been fully paid would be canceled unless she provided another form of payment. But the most important call came that afternoon, to my friend Judy, who worked in real estate. I need to sell my house, I told her. Quickly, for a fair price, to a buyer who can close fast. Annabelle, are you sure? Judy asked, concern evident in her voice. This is a major decision. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Judy moved quickly. The market was hot, and my modest 3-bedroom in a good school district was exactly what many buyers wanted. Within 48 hours, I had an all-cash offer from a young family, $50,000 above asking price, willing to close in 2 weeks. I set the closing date for the day of Megan's wedding. I knew she'd be too occupied to notice anything until afterward. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of sorting, packing, and donating. I kept only what held true sentimental value, or what I would need for a fresh start: family photos, my mother's china, clothes, and personal items. The rest I donated to a women's shelter that had helped me during the dark days after David's death. I opened new accounts at a different bank, one where Megan had no history or connections. I transferred all my remaining assets there, closing the old accounts that Megan might have been able to access. Each step felt both painful and freeing. This house held 20 years of memories, both beautiful and difficult. But it had also become a symbol of my inability to set boundaries, my willingness to be used. As the moving truck took away the last boxes bound for storage, I ran my hand along the living room wall where we had marked Megan's height each year. "Goodbye," I whispered, to the house and to the woman I had been within it. The morning of Megan's wedding dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for a bride. I woke early in my nearly empty house, just a suitcase and overnight bag remaining. At 10 o'clock, while Megan was undoubtedly getting her hair and makeup done with her bridesmaids, I met with the buyers and their agent at the title company office. "Are you sure you don't want to postpone until after the weekend?" the closing agent asked kindly. "I heard you mention your daughter's wedding is today." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "This timing works best for everyone." By 11:30, it was done. The house was sold. The proceeds, just over $400,000 after paying off the equity line, were safely transferred to my new account. I drove back to the empty house, one last time to collect my bags. As I was leaving, my phone buzzed with a text from Susan, my old nursing colleague who was attending the wedding. She knew about my situation, one of the few people I had confided in. "Ceremony starting soon. Everything looks beautiful but tense undercurrents with vendors. Palmer family seems stressed. Megan glowing but snippy with bridesmaids. Wish you were here." I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the church and parked across the street. From my car, I could see the guests arriving, the wedding party bustling around. I watched Jackson's parents arrive in their luxury car, his mother adjusting her hat as they walked up the steps. I saw Megan's bridesmaids in their matching dresses, taking selfies on the church steps. For a moment, I felt a stab of grief. This should have been a day we shared together. In another reality, I would be inside, helping my daughter with last-minute details, telling her how proud her father would have been. But that wasn't our reality anymore. The Megan I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be drained and discarded. I started the car and drove away, heading to the airport hotel where I'd booked a room. From there, I systematically set up automatic payment denials for all the cards Megan had opened in my name. I froze the credit bureaus to prevent any new accounts. I changed my phone number, keeping my old one active, only to monitor incoming messages. Throughout the afternoon, texts from Susan kept me updated. "Ceremony beautiful," Megan cried during vows. "No mention of your absence." Later, reception starting. Some issue with caterer demanding payment before serving dinner. Megan used wedding gift money to cover. And finally, Palmer family left early, looking unhappy. Jackson drinking heavily. Megan alternating between beaming bride and panicked whispers with wedding planner. Several vendors arguing in hallway about final payments. I sent a simple reply. "Thank you for being my eyes. I'm doing fine." That night, as the wedding reception would be winding down, the texts from Megan started arriving on my old number. "Mom, the honeymoon reservation is messed up. They're saying final payment wasn't made." "Then, why aren't you answering? The resort needs payment now or we lose the villa." Followed by, "Did you cancel the payment? What the hell, Mom? Fix this." The messages continued, growing increasingly desperate and angry as cards were declined at the luxury resort. The accusations of sabotage, the threats, the attempts at manipulation, they washed over me without effect. By morning, I had checked out of the hotel and was boarding a plane to coastal North Carolina, where I'd rented a small cottage for the next 3 months. As the plane lifted off, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: heartbreak for what had been lost, guilt for my role in creating the situation, but also, unexpectedly, a sense of liberation. For the first time in 20 years, I was putting myself first. The weight of constant sacrifice had lifted, replaced by the lightness of possibility. What would life look like when it was shaped by my own dreams and needs? As the plane climbed through the clouds, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to imagine finding out. The small coastal town of Beaufort, North Carolina, became my sanctuary. I rented a tiny cottage just 2 blocks from the water, with a screened porch where I could sit in the evenings and listen to the distant sound of waves. The first week, I did little besides walk on the beach, sleep, and cry. The grief came in waves, not just for the daughter I'd lost, but for the years I'd spent enabling her transformation. Gradually, I began building a routine: morning walks along the shore, afternoon visits to the local library, evening meals on my porch. I signed up for a community art class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I volunteered at the senior center, reading to residents with failing eyesight, small steps toward a new life. Susan kept me updated on the aftermath of the wedding. According to her sources, Megan and Jackson had returned early from their honeymoon, their luxury villa downgraded to a standard room after multiple payment issues. The Palmer family, discovering the extent of the financial mess and Megan's lies, had refused to bail them out. Jackson's position at his father's firm was now precarious, his judgment called into question. "She's been calling mutual friends looking for you," Susan texted one evening, telling different stories each time. To some, "You're ill, and she's worried." To others, "You've had a mental breakdown." To a few, she's admitted you had a falling out but claims you stole wedding money. I wasn't surprised. Megan had always been skilled at reshaping reality to suit her needs. 1 month into my stay, I was beginning to feel at home in Beaufort. I'd made a few casual friends at my art class. The owner of the local bookstore knew me by name. I was sleeping through the night again, no longer waking with anxiety about bills and debts. The proceeds from the house sale, carefully invested with Harriet's help, would provide a modest but comfortable living. Then came the day I'd been both expecting and dreading. I was returning from a morning beach walk when I saw an unfamiliar rental car parked outside my cottage. Sitting on my porch steps, scrolling through her phone with an impatient expression, was Megan. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. Gone was the designer handbag. Her clothes were simple, her hair pulled back in a ponytail rather than professionally styled. When she saw me approaching, she stood quickly, her expression cycling from relief to anger to calculation in seconds. "Finally," she said, "do you know how hard it was to track you down?" Aunt Susan wouldn't tell me anything until I literally begged. I unlocked the door without responding and walked inside. After a moment's hesitation, she followed. "Nice disappearing act, Mom," she continued, looking around the small cottage with barely concealed disdain. "Really mature." I set down my beach bag and turned to face her. "Why are you here, Megan?" "Why am I here?" she repeated incredulously. "You sabotaged my wedding and honeymoon, destroyed my credit, sold our family home without telling me, and disappeared. My life is in ruins because of you." "Is that really how you see it?" I asked quietly. "How else would I see it? Everything was perfect until you decided to be vindictive." She paced the small living room. "The vendors are all demanding payment. My credit score is destroyed. Jackson's parents think I'm some kind of con artist. And you're here playing beach bum." "Sit down," I said, my voice firm but not angry. "If you've come all this way, you can at least listen." Something in my tone must have registered, because she sat on the edge of the couch, arms crossed defensively. "You weren't banned from your wedding, Megan. You banned yourself when you decided I was nothing more than an ATM. You weren't sabotaged. I simply stopped allowing you to use me financially. As for the house, It was my house, not ours. You haven't lived there in years, except when you wanted something. That's not fair, she protested. You know I was planning to help you sell it after the wedding so we could both upgrade. Jackson and I were going to let you stay with us until you found a retirement place. Let me stay with you? In the condo you expected me to pay for? I shook my head. I saw your emails, Megan. Your 3-step plan. Convince me to sell. Guilt me into giving you the money. Take my furniture. You've been planning to use me and discard me for months. Her face flushed. You read my private emails? That's an invasion of privacy. An email you copied me on by mistake. And yes, reading it was wrong. But it showed me the truth I'd been avoiding. That our relationship had become toxic and enabling. So you decided to punish me? On my wedding day? No, Megan. I decided to stop punishing myself by financing your lifestyle. There's a difference. She shifted tactics then, tears welling up. Mom, please. I'm desperate. Jackson is talking about separation. His father has put him on probation at work. We're facing eviction from our apartment. I need your help. The old me would have crumbled at those tears. The new me recognized manipulation when I saw it. What exactly do you want from me, Megan? The money from the house, she said immediately, confirming this was the real purpose of her visit. It should have been half mine anyway. And I need an emergency loan to cover the wedding debts before they ruin my credit completely. Instead of answering directly, I walked to my small desk and retrieved a folder. From it, I pulled out a stack of financial statements and laid them on the coffee table between us. This is documentation of the money I've given you over the past 2 years. $75,000 in savings, $60,000 from the home equity line, $32,000 in credit card charges you made with me as co-signer. That's $167,000 total, Megan. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly recovered. So you've kept receipts to throw in my face? Nice, Mom. No, to show you reality. Do you know what my annual salary was as a nurse? $56,000? I gave you 3 years' worth of my income for a one-day event. She looked away, uncomfortable for the first time. I didn't ask for all that. You did, repeatedly and explicitly. And I gave it because I failed as a parent in teaching you financial responsibility and appropriate boundaries. So now what? She demanded. You're going to let me suffer to teach me a lesson? Let my marriage fail? Let me be homeless? I took a deep breath. The proceeds from the house sale have been divided. I've donated $25,000 to a charity supporting single mothers, in your name. The rest is in an irrevocable trust, divided into 2 portions. One for my retirement, which I've already begun using to support myself. The other is for any future grandchildren's education fund. What about me? She asked, looking genuinely shocked. There's nothing for me directly? Nothing that you can access, no. Never again. Her face contorted with rage. You vindictive old bitch. You've ruined everything. I'm your daughter, your only child. How could you do this to me? I ruined nothing, Megan. I simply stopped enabling. There's a world of difference. She stormed around the small cottage, alternating between threats, insults, and desperate bargaining. She'd sue me. She'd tell everyone I was mentally ill. She'd never let me see any future grandchildren. Then, couldn't I at least give her $10,000 as an emergency loan? $5,000? Even $1,000? I let her rage, watching, with a strange detachment, as she cycled through every manipulation tactic she'd ever used on me. None of them worked anymore. Finally, exhausted, she collapsed back onto the couch, mascara streaking her face. What am I supposed to do now? She whispered, and for the first time, I heard genuine fear in her voice. You're going to do what adults do, Megan. Face consequences, solve problems, grow up. I don't know how, she admitted, her voice small. I've never had to. I know, I said gently, and that's my fault as much as yours. I failed you by making everything too easy. But you're smart and capable when you choose to be. You'll figure it out. She left an hour later. No resolution reached. No money given. As her rental car pulled away, I sat on my porch steps and finally allowed myself to cry. Not from guilt, but from grief for the relationship we should have had, and from hope that maybe, just maybe, this necessary pain would lead to growth for both of us. 6 months passed, bringing with them the gentle rhythm of seasons in a coastal town. Summer tourists departed, leaving Beaufort to its year-round residents. I found myself becoming one of them, no longer feeling like a visitor. My art class had led to a small circle of friends, other women in their 60s and 70s, who met weekly for coffee and conversation. My volunteer work at the senior center had expanded to include leading a memoir writing group. I'd even started selling small watercolor paintings of local scenes at the Saturday farmers market. Nothing that would make me rich, but enough to supplement my careful budget. My cottage, originally a 3-month rental, had become my permanent home after I approached the owner with a modest offer to purchase it. The place was small but sufficient, and waking up each morning to the distant sound of waves felt like the realization of a long-deferred dream. News of Megan came sporadically through Susan, who remained our tenuous connection. The beautiful wedding had been followed by an ugly financial reckoning. Jackson's family, discovering the extent of the debts and deception, had withdrawn their support. Their lavish apartment was gone, replaced by a studio in a less prestigious neighborhood. The designer clothes had been sold on consignment sites. Most significantly, according to Susan, the marriage had collapsed after just 5 months. Jackson, faced with financial stress and his family's disappointment, had proven to be as shallow as I'd suspected. He'd filed for separation, blaming Megan entirely for their troubles. "She's working at Nordstrom now," Susan told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "First real full-time job she's ever had. The manager is tough but fair. She's learning to deal with difficult customers, show up on time, manage her schedule." I absorbed this information with mixed emotions. Part of me felt validated that the painful lesson was bearing fruit. Another part ached for my daughter's struggles, the maternal instinct to protect, never fully extinguished. "Has she mentioned me?" I asked, as I always did. "Not directly," Susan replied, "but she's different lately, less entitled. She asked me how to make a budget last month, actually took notes when I explained basic financial planning. Then one ordinary Tuesday, I checked my mail and found a handwritten letter with a postmark from our old city. My heart quickened as I recognized Megan's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a 5-page letter, the first page marked with what appeared to be dried tears. I took it to my favorite spot on the beach and sat on a weathered bench to read. "Dear Mom," it began. "This is the 12th version of this letter. I've been trying to write to you for weeks, but the words never seem adequate. How do you apologize for years of selfishness? How do you make amends for treating the person who loved you most as nothing but a resource to be used?" The letter continued, detailing her journey over the past 6 months. The humiliation of returning from a truncated honeymoon to find vendors demanding payment. The shock of Jackson's transformation from doting fiancé to cold, accusatory stranger once the money ran dry. The reality check of being fully responsible for herself for the first time at 28 years old. "I've learned to do things I never bothered with before," she wrote. "Cooking meals instead of ordering takeout, cleaning my own tiny apartment, creating a budget and actually sticking to it, taking the bus instead of Ubers. All the adult skills you tried to teach me that I was too entitled to learn." She described her job at Nordstrom, the 6-day work weeks, the demanding customers, the modest paycheck that barely covered her necessities after student loan payments. "The hardest part has been facing myself in the mirror each night, really seeing who I became and how I treated you. I keep remembering specific moments, how I mocked your clothes at the bridal shop, how I excluded you from the wedding planning, how I screamed at you at the rehearsal dinner. Each memory makes me physically ill now. What kind of person treats their mother that way? What kind of daughter was I?" The letter ended simply, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your difficult choice forced me to grow up in ways nothing else could have. I'm still struggling, still learning, still making mistakes. But I'm trying to become someone you might someday be proud of again. Someone worthy of being your daughter. With love and deepest regret, Megan. I read the letter 3 times. Waves crashing rhythmically on the shore, seagulls calling overhead. The wounds were still there, not fully healed, but something new had emerged alongside them. Hope. Not for an instant restoration of our relationship, but for the possibility of building something healthier in the future. That night, I wrote back a simple note. Dear Megan, thank you for your letter. It took courage to write. I'd like to hear more about your new life. Perhaps you could visit for a weekend? There's a beautiful beach here I'd like to show you. Love. Mom. 2 weeks later, we arranged for her to come. She would take the bus, a 20-hour journey with multiple transfers. When I offered to help with a plane ticket, she declined politely. I need to do this myself, she explained during our brief phone conversation confirming details. I've been depending on others my whole life. It's time I stood on my own feet, even if they're sore from sitting on a bus. That small moment of self-awareness gave me more hope than anything else had. The Beaufort bus station was little more than a convenience store with a small waiting area. I arrived 30 minutes early, nervously arranging and rearranging my purse strap, wondering if this reunion was premature or if the tentative bridge we were building would collapse under the weight of past hurts. When the bus finally arrived, Megan was one of the last passengers to disembark. She looked both familiar and different, thinner, with her hair cut in a simple, practical style, rather than the elaborate balayage she'd maintained for years. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, carrying a well-worn backpack instead of designer luggage. She spotted me and froze momentarily, uncertainty flickering across her face. Then she approached slowly, stopping a few feet away. Hi, Mom, she said softly. Hello, Megan, I replied, fighting the urge to close the distance between us. We needed to rebuild slowly, respecting the new boundaries. Thank you for inviting me, she said formally, as if speaking to a distant acquaintance rather than her mother. I'm glad you could come. The awkwardness hung between us during the short drive to my cottage. Megan looked out the window at the small coastal town, occasionally making polite observations about the scenery. I pointed out local landmarks, the bookstore with the resident cat, the coffee shop where my friends and I met weekly, the community center where I volunteered. At the cottage, I showed her to the small guest room I'd prepared, really just a converted sun porch with a daybed. It's not much, I apologized. It's perfect, she said, setting down her backpack. Has a great view of the garden. That first evening remained stilted, our conversation careful and superficial. We shared a simple dinner I'd prepared, and Megan insisted on washing the dishes afterward, something the old Megan would never have done. We watched the sunset from the porch, speaking little but gradually growing more comfortable with the silence. The real breakthrough came the next morning. I woke early, as was my habit now, and found Megan already in the kitchen, attempting to make coffee with my French press. I've never used one of these before, she admitted, looking flustered. I always just ordered coffee, or used Jackson's fancy machine. Here, let me show you, I offered, standing beside her at the counter. As I demonstrated the simple process, she watched with genuine interest. You know what's weird? She said as we waited for the coffee to steep. I'm 28 years old, and I'm just now learning basic things that most people figure out in college. How to cook, how to clean properly, how to manage money. It's never too late to learn, I said gently. But that's the thing, she continued, staring at the French press as if it held profound answers. You tried to teach me. I remember you offering when I got my first apartment. I thought I was too good for those lessons, that they were beneath me. We all have blind spots, Megan. Mine was the size of Texas. She looked up at me, her eyes clear and direct for the first time in years. I was horrible to you, Mom. Not just at the wedding, for years before that. I treated you like you existed to serve me. I mocked your life, your clothes, your home, everything you sacrificed to give me opportunities. I didn't contradict her. We both needed this honesty. I never valued anything you did, she continued, because it came too easily. All I had to do was ask, or demand, and you would make it happen. I never saw the cost to you. I bear responsibility too, I said softly. I wanted to give you everything because I couldn't give you your father. I thought I was showing love by never setting boundaries. That wasn't love, Megan said with surprising wisdom. That was fear. You were afraid of losing me, so you kept trying to buy my affection. The simple truth of her statement took my breath away. Yes, I admitted. I was terrified of being alone, of failing you, of not being enough. And I exploited that fear without even realizing it. She poured the coffee into 2 mugs. The irony is, now I'm the one who's afraid of being alone, of failing, of not being enough. We took our coffee to the beach, walking along the shore as the morning sun cast long shadows on the sand. Slowly, Megan shared more details about her new life. The tiny studio apartment she could barely afford, the job selling cosmetics that exhausted her but taught her valuable lessons, the humbling experience of learning to budget every dollar. I'm on a debt management plan, she explained. 5 years of careful payments to clean up the wedding mess. No credit cards allowed. Everything has to be cash or debit. That sounds challenging, but sensible, I commented, impressed by her commitment. It's excruciating sometimes, she admitted with a self-deprecating laugh, but also freeing. I don't have to keep up with anyone's expectations anymore. I'm just trying to be a functional adult. Later that day, as we prepared dinner together in my small kitchen, Megan broached the subject I'd been expecting. Mom, I'm not here to ask for money, she began carefully, but I could use some advice. I've been trying to create a budget, but I keep failing. I either make it so strict I can't possibly follow it, or so loose it doesn't solve anything. Instead of immediately offering solutions, I asked questions. What were her fixed expenses? What debts was she prioritizing? What financial goals did she have beyond survival? As she answered, I could see her thinking process changing, moving from short-term crisis management toward longer-term planning. We sat at the kitchen table with paper and pencil, working through a realistic monthly budget together, not as mother rescuing daughter, but as one adult helping another navigate a challenge. Thank you, she said when we finished, for teaching me instead of just fixing it for me. You're welcome, I replied, feeling a new kind of pride, not in what I'd given her, but in what she was learning to do for herself. On her final evening, we walked on the beach at sunset. The awkwardness of her arrival had given way to a tentative new understanding. We weren't fully healed. That would take years, if it ever happened completely. But we had begun. Do you think we can have a relationship again? Megan asked suddenly, stopping to watch the waves. A real one, not the toxic mess we had before? I considered my answer carefully. I think we're building something different now, something healthier. It won't be what it was, but maybe it can be something better. I'd like that, she said quietly. I miss having a mother, not an ATM or a servant, a mother. And I've missed being one. A real one, not an enabler. We stood side by side, watching the sun disappear below the horizon. The tide was coming in, erasing footprints along the shore, just as time might eventually soften the harsh edges of our painful history. I'm sorry it took such drastic measures for me to grow up, Megan said finally. Sometimes the deepest love means allowing someone to face the consequences of their actions, I replied, echoing my thoughts from that day outside the church. I couldn't rescue you from yourself anymore. You saved me by not saving me, she acknowledged. It just took me a while to see it. As darkness fell over the beach, we turned back toward my cottage, my new home that represented not what I had lost, but what I had finally found. The courage to value myself as much as I had always valued my daughter. The journey ahead would not be easy. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. Patterns, once established, resist change. But watching Megan walk beside me, struggling but standing on her own 2 feet, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not the desperate hope of a mother trying to buy her daughter's love, but the quiet pride of seeing someone you care about finally growing into their potential. Sometimes the most profound freedom comes from letting go of what we thought we needed to hold on to most tightly. In releasing my daughter from the unhealthy patterns we'd created together, I had not only set her free to become her best self, I had finally done the same for me. What about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice that caused short-term pain but led to long-term growth, either for yourself or someone you love? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage on yours.